The afternoon Victoria Kane discovered her well had finally given up was the same afternoon she realized she might lose everything her husband had died to build. She stood in the dusty yard of their modest ranch outside Kingston, Nevada, staring down into the stone-lined shaft that had sustained them through 3 summers, and saw nothing but cracked earth 30 feet below. The bucket came up empty for the 3rd time, and she let the rope slip through her calloused hands, listening to the hollow clang as it hit bottom. It was September 1882, and the drought had been merciless. The well had started failing in June, producing less and less each week until now it offered nothing at all. Victoria was 24 years old, a widow for 8 months, and she had exactly $43 to her name. The nearest town was 3 miles east, and the closest neighbor was the Hendricks spread, 2 miles north. She had 12 head of cattle that needed water, a vegetable garden that had already withered to nothing, and a determination that had been forged in the same unforgiving landscape that now threatened to break her. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand and looked across the scrubland toward the distant mountains. The sky was that particular shade of blue that seemed to mock the parched earth below, cloudless and indifferent. Her husband Thomas had bought this land 5 years ago, convinced that the small spring-fed well would be enough. For a while it had been. They had built a life here, modest but theirs. Then the fever had taken him last winter and Victoria had been left to manage alone. She would not give up. She could not afford to. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Hand instinctively moving to the rifle she kept propped against the porch post. A rider was coming up the long drive, moving at an easy pace that suggested he was not in a hurry. As he drew closer, Victoria could make out details. A tall man on a sorrel horse, wearing a dusty black hat and carrying himself with the loose-limbed confidence of someone who spent more time in the saddle than out of it. He reined in about 20 feet from where she stood, giving her space, respecting the unspoken rules of approaching a solitary woman on an isolated ranch. His eyes were a startling blue-green against his sun-bronzed skin, and he looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a few days' worth of beard shadowing his jaw. "Afternoon, madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and unhurried, with a trace of something southern in the vowels. "Name is Kade Isaacs. I was passing through and thought I might water my horse if you could spare it." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "The well is dry," she said flatly. "Has been since June, but it finally gave out completely today." Something shifted in his expression, a combination of sympathy and understanding. "I am sorry to hear that. That is hard luck." "Hard luck seems to be all I have lately," Victoria said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her tone. This stranger did not need to hear her problems. "There is a creek about 4 miles west if you follow the line of cottonwoods. It is running low, but there should be enough for your horse." Kade dismounted in one fluid motion and stood looking at the well, then back at her. "How deep is it?" 30 feet, give or take. "My husband dug it himself when we first settled here." "Mind if I take a look?" Victoria shrugged, too tired to question his interest. Kade walked over to the well and peered down into it, then picked up the rope and lowered the bucket all the way to the bottom, listening. He pulled it up, examined the few damp spots on the wood, and then looked out across her property, his gaze assessing. "You have good land here," he said, "and I would wager there is still water below. The well just is not deep enough to reach it." Victoria laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "That may be true, but I do not have the means to dig deeper. I barely have enough to get through the winter as it is." Kade was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. He had the calloused fingers of a working man, she noticed, and there was something steady about him that made her less wary than she might have been. "I could dig it for you," he said finally. She stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need it done, and I know how to do it." He met her eyes directly. "I have been drifting since spring, working odd jobs, trying to figure out what comes next. I am handy with a shovel and I have dug wells before. If you could spare room and board while I work, that would be payment enough." Victoria's mind raced. Having a strange man on her property was risky, but losing the ranch was certain if she had no water. She studied him more carefully, looking for signs of dishonesty or danger, but all she saw was a tired young man who seemed sincere. "I have a small barn where you could sleep," she said slowly. "And I can provide meals, though they will not be fancy. But I want to be clear, Mr. Isaacs, I am a widow living alone, and I will not tolerate any impropriety." "I would not dream of it, madam," he said solemnly. "You have my word." Victoria nodded. "Then you have a deal. When can you start?" "First light tomorrow, if that suits you." "It does." Kade smiled then, a genuine expression that softened his features and made him look younger. "I will get my horse settled and stay out of your way until supper, if that is all right. There is hay in the barn and a trough, though the water in it is a few days old. I have been rationing what little I had left." Victoria hesitated, then added, "Supper will be ready at 6. She watched him lead his horse toward the barn, moving with an easy grace that spoke of years spent working with animals. Then she turned and went back into the house, her mind whirling with questions and a tiny, fragile sprout of hope. That evening, Victoria set 2 places at her small kitchen table for the first time since Thomas had died. She had made a simple stew from the last of her vegetables and some salt pork, along with biscuits that were only slightly burned on the bottom. It felt strange to cook for someone else, to hear boots on her porch that did not belong to a memory. Kade knocked softly before entering, even though she had left the door open to catch the cooling evening air. He had washed up at the pump, she could tell, and had done his best to beat the dust from his clothes. "It smells wonderful," he said, and she could tell he meant it. They ate in a silence that was not quite comfortable but not entirely awkward either. Victoria was acutely aware of his presence across from her, the way his hands dwarfed the tin cup, the methodical way he ate, as if savoring every bite. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked finally. 8 months. My husband died of fever last January." The words came out more easily than they used to. Time had not healed the wound, but it had taught her to carry it. "I am sorry, that must be terribly hard." "It is what it is," Victoria said. "What about you? Where is your family?" "Tennessee, originally. My parents had a farm outside Nashville. I left when I was 18, thought I would see the world, make my fortune." He smiled ruefully. "That was 7 years ago. I have seen a lot of country, but the fortune has been elusive." "Why did you leave?" Kade was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "My father and I did not see eye to eye on much. He wanted me to settle down, marry the daughter of our neighbor, take over the farm. I wanted something different, though I could not have told you what, so I left." "You regret it?" "Sometimes. Other times I think it was the only choice I could have made." He looked at her with those striking eyes. "What about you? Do you ever wish you had chosen differently?" Victoria considered the question honestly. "No, Thomas and I had 5 good years. We built this place together and I loved him. I still do. But I will not let his memory die with the land. That is why I have to make this work." "Then we will make it work," Kade said simply. Something in his certainty made her believe him. The next morning, Victoria woke before dawn to the sound of someone already moving around outside. She dressed quickly and found Kade by the well, laying out tools he must have had in his saddlebags. A sturdy shovel, a pick, a length of good rope, and a block and tackle. You came prepared, she observed. Old habits, he said. When you drift, you learn to carry what you might need. She brought him coffee and watched as he rigged up a pulley system over the well. The work was going to be dangerous, she realized. 30 feet was deep enough to kill a man if he fell, and deeper would be worse. Are you sure about this? She asked. I am sure. He tested the rope, checking its strength. I will work in short shifts and be careful, but Mrs. Kane, I need you to know this could take weeks. The ground is hard and I will be working alone. I can help, Victoria said. I am stronger than I look. Kade studied her, taking in her work-worn hands and the determined set of her jaw. I believe you. All right, then. Here is what we will do. I will go down and dig, fill buckets with earth and rock, and you can haul them up with the pulley. Every hour, we will switch out so I can rest and make sure the shaft stays stable. They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Kade would descend into the well at first light, and Victoria would position herself at the top, hauling up bucket after bucket of earth and stone. The work was back-breaking and monotonous, but there was something almost meditative about it. They did not talk much while working, saving their breath for the labor, but during their breaks they began to share pieces of themselves. Victoria learned that Kade had worked as a ranch hand, a railroad laborer, a deputy sheriff for 6 months in a small town in Colorado, and half a dozen other jobs. He had a restless quality to him, as if he was always searching for something he could not quite name. But he was unfailingly polite, kept his word about respecting her space, and worked harder than any man she had ever known, including her late husband. For his part, Kade discovered that Victoria was educated, having attended a school for young women in Philadelphia before her family lost their money in the Panic of 1873. She had met Thomas when he was working as a clerk in her father's office, before the bankruptcy. They had married quickly and headed west, looking for a fresh start. She read voraciously, though she had few books, and she had a sharp mind that caught details most people missed. You should have been a teacher, Kade said one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set behind the mountains. I thought about it once, but then there was Thomas and this place, and that life seemed very far away. She paused. Do you think we ever really choose our lives, or do they just happen to us? I think it is some of both, Kade said. We make choices, but the world makes them too, and somewhere in between is where we actually live. Victoria smiled. That is unexpectedly philosophical for a drifter. I've had a lot of time to think while riding. By the end of the first week, Kade had dug down another 6 feet. The work was getting harder as he went deeper, the earth more compacted, with layers of rock that had to be broken up with the pick before they could be shoveled out. Victoria insisted on taking shifts, lowering herself down to spell him, despite his protests. I told you I am stronger than I look, she said firmly, and he had learned by then not to argue when she used that tone. Working in the well was claustrophobic and disorienting. The circle of light above seemed very small and far away, and the air was close and damp. Victoria found herself counting her breaths, focusing on the rhythm of the work to keep panic at bay. When she called up that she was ready to come out, Kade would haul her up with the rope secured around her waist, his strength making the ascent quick and smooth. The first time their hands touched as he helped her over the lip of the well, Victoria felt something electric pass between them. She told herself it was just static from the dry air, but she could not quite make herself believe it. Kade's hands lingered on her arms a moment longer than necessary, steadying her, and when she looked up into his face, she saw something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Thank you," she managed, stepping back. "Anytime," he said quietly. That night, lying in her bed alone as she had for 8 months, Victoria allowed herself to acknowledge what had been building between them. It felt like a betrayal of Thomas's memory, and yet it also felt like waking up from a long sleep. She was not sure which sensation frightened her more. The second week brought a new challenge. At 40 feet, they hit a layer of rock that would not break, no matter how hard Kade swung the pick. He came up frustrated and exhausted, his shirt soaked through with sweat. "We might need to drill through it," he said, collapsing in the shade of the porch, "or try to go around it, which could take even longer." Victoria brought him water from the dwindling supply she had been hoarding. "How much longer can we manage? The cattle need water soon, or you will start losing them." Kade's face was grim, "and we are not far behind them." "Then we keep going," Victoria said. "Whatever it takes." Kade looked at her with something like admiration. "You do not give up, do you?" "I cannot afford to." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We will get there, Victoria. I promise you." It was the first time he had used her given name, and she did not correct him. Instead, she squeezed back, holding on perhaps a moment longer than propriety dictated. They worked through the heat of the day, taking turns hammering at the rock with a determination born of desperation. Victoria's hands blistered and bled, but she wrapped them in cloth and kept going. Kade's shoulders and back must have been screaming with pain, but he never complained. They were partners in this, united by necessity and something else, something neither of them was quite ready to name. On the 10th day, as the sun was setting and they were preparing to quit for the night, Kade went down one more time. Victoria waited at the top, listening to the distant ring of the pick against stone. Then the sound changed, became wetter somehow, and Kade let out a shout. "Victoria, pull me up, quick!" She hauled on the rope with all her strength, and when his head appeared over the edge, he was grinning like a madman. "Water!" he gasped. "I broke through and there is water." Victoria felt her knees go weak with relief. She helped him out and they stood there, both breathing hard, covered in dirt and sweat. And then suddenly she was in his arms and he was lifting her off the ground, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, his hands stayed at her waist and her hands were on his shoulders, and they were standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The laughter faded and something else took its place, something charged and intense. "Victoria," Kade said softly, and there was a question in the way he said her name. She knew she should step back, should maintain the careful distance they had been preserving. But she was tired of being alone, tired of being strong, and in that moment, all she wanted was to feel alive again. "Kade," she whispered, and it was answer enough. He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost tentative, giving her room to pull away. But Victoria leaned into it instead, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and hungry. It had been so long since anyone had touched her like this, since she had felt wanted and alive and present in her own skin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for days," he admitted. "I know," Victoria said. "So have I. I do not want to dishonor your husband's memory. Thomas would have wanted me to be happy, and you make me happy, Kade. You make me feel like myself again." "I am just a drifter with no prospects and no future," he said, but there was hope in his voice, as if he wanted her to contradict him. "You are the man who saved my ranch," Victoria said firmly. "You are the man who kept his word and worked himself half to death for a stranger. You are the man I want." Kade kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise. "Then I am yours if you will have me." "I will have you," Victoria said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. That night, they sat on the porch long after the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Kade told her about the places he had seen, the people he had met, the dreams he had given up on. Victoria told him about her marriage, about the loneliness of widowhood, about the fear that had been her constant companion since Thomas died. "I was so angry at him for leaving me," she confessed. "I know it was not his fault that he did not choose to get sick, but I was still furious. How dare he die and leave me to manage all of this alone?" "That is not wrong," Kade said. "Anger is just another face of grief. Were you angry when you left home?" "Furious. At my father for not understanding me, at myself for not being able to be what he wanted, at the whole world for making me choose." He was quiet for a moment. "But maybe I was not running away. Maybe I was just trying to run towards something, and I did not know what it was until now." Victoria took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "What is it? This, you, a place to belong." They sat in comfortable silence after that, and when Kade finally stood to head to the barn, Victoria caught his hand. "Stay," she said simply. His eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." Kade stayed. The next few weeks transformed Victoria's world in ways she had not anticipated. The well was producing good, clean water, enough for the cattle and the house, and even to start reviving her garden. But more than that, Kade was there, solid and steady, helping with everything that needed doing. He repaired the fence that had been sagging since spring, fixed the loose boards on the porch, and gentle broke the young mare that Thomas had bought but never had time to train. They fell into a routine that felt remarkably like a marriage, though they had not spoken the word aloud. Kade would rise early and tend to the livestock while Victoria made breakfast. They would work together through the morning, breaking for lunch, then continue until the heat of the day drove them to the shade. Evenings were for small repairs and maintenance, and then they would have supper and sit together, talking or simply enjoying the quiet. At night, Kade would hold her, and they would talk in whispers about their pasts and their hopes. He told her about the first time he had seen the ocean, how vast and terrifying and beautiful it was. She told him about her mother, who had died when Victoria was 12, and how much she still missed her. They shared their fears and their failures, their embarrassments and their small triumphs, weaving their lives together one story at a time. Making love with Kade was different from what Victoria had known with Thomas. Thomas had been kind but reserved, their intimacy gentle and predictable. Kade was passionate and attentive, learning what made her gasp and sigh, taking his time to explore and discover. He made her feel beautiful and desired in a way she had never experienced, and she found herself opening up to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. But it was not just the physical connection that bound them. It was the way he listened when she talked about her plans for the ranch, treating her ideas with respect and offering suggestions without dismissing her knowledge. It was the way he remembered that she liked her coffee strong and black in the morning but with cream in the evening. It was the small kindnesses, like bringing her wildflowers he found while checking the fence line, or rubbing her shoulders when they ached from hauling water. One evening in late October, as they watched the sun set from the porch, Kade cleared his throat nervously. "Victoria, I need to ask you something." She looked at him, noting the tension in his shoulders. "What is it? I know this might seem sudden, and maybe I should wait longer, but I am not a patient man when it comes to things that matter." He took her hand. "I do not have much to offer you. No money to speak of, no property, just myself and my willingness to work. But I love you, Victoria. I love you more than I have ever loved anything or anyone, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Victoria's heart was hammering in her chest. "Kade, what are you saying?" "I am saying marry me. Let me be your partner, not just in work but in everything. Let me help you build this ranch into something great. Let me give you the life you deserve." She was crying, she realized, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," she managed. "I did not think I could feel this way again, and certainly not so soon, but you have become everything to me." "Is that a yes?" Kade asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Victoria said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "I will make you happy," Kade promised. "Every day for the rest of our lives, I will work to make you happy." "You already do," Victoria said. "Just by being here, by choosing to stay, you make me happier than I ever thought possible." They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who came through Kingston once a month. It was a simple ceremony in the small church at the edge of town, with the Hendricks family as their witnesses. Victoria wore her best dress, a deep blue calico that brought out her eyes, and Kade had bought a new shirt for the occasion, clean and crisp and white. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Kade kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria felt her heart might burst. They were building something together, she realized, something real and lasting. The well that Kade had dug was not just a source of water, it was a foundation for their future. The winter was mild that year, and they spent it making improvements to the ranch. Kade had saved some money from his various jobs, and combined with Victoria's carefully hoarded funds, they had enough to buy lumber for a new barn and more cattle to expand the herd. Victoria proved to have a good head for business, negotiating fair prices and keeping careful accounts. Kade was the muscle and the vision, seeing potential where others saw only hardship. They worked from dawn to dusk, but the work felt different now that they were doing it together. There was joy in the labor, a sense of building something permanent and worthwhile. At night, they would collapse into bed exhausted but content, wrapped in each other's arms, planning and dreaming. In March, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not been sure, and when the doctor in Kingston confirmed it, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had wanted children with Thomas, but it had never happened, and she had begun to think perhaps she could not conceive. Now, at 25, she was going to be a mother. When she told Kade, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with pure joy, and he picked her up and spun her around before remembering her condition and setting her down gently, apologizing profusely. "I am not made of glass," Victoria laughed. "I can handle being spun." "I am going to be a father," Kade said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy about it?" Victoria asked, suddenly worried. "Happy, Victoria, I am over the moon. This is everything I never knew I wanted." He cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you for giving me this gift. Thank you for choosing me." "You chose me first," Victoria reminded him, "when you stopped at a stranger's ranch and offered to dig a well." "Best decision I ever made," Kade said and kissed her. The pregnancy was not easy. Victoria was sick most mornings and exhausted all the time, but she refused to stop working. Kade tried to get her to rest more, but she was stubborn, insisting that she was perfectly capable of her regular tasks. "You are carrying our child," Kade argued one afternoon when he found her hauling water from the well. "Let me do the heavy work." "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Victoria countered. "Besides, I need to stay active or I will go mad with boredom." They compromised, with Victoria doing lighter tasks and Kade taking on the more strenuous labor. He was protective to the point of being overbearing sometimes, but Victoria could not fault him for it. He was going to be a wonderful father, she knew, attentive and involved and loving. As her belly grew, Victoria found herself thinking about the future more concretely. They would need to add onto the house eventually, create more space for the child and any others who might follow. The ranch was doing well, better than it had ever done under Thomas, and she allowed herself to dream big. Maybe they could build a real cattle operation, hire help, become one of the prosperous families in the territory. What do you want to name the baby? Kade asked one evening as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her swollen stomach. If it is a boy, I was thinking maybe Thomas after my first husband. Would that bother you? Kade was quiet for a moment, considering. No, I think that would be fitting. He helped build this place too, and he should be remembered. And if it is a girl, I've always liked the name Eliza after my grandmother. She was the kindest person I ever knew and tough as nails. Raised 6 children mostly on her own when my grandfather was away fighting in the war. Eliza Kane Isaacs, Victoria said, trying it out. I like it. Or Thomas Kane Isaacs. Either way, our child will be lucky to have you as a father. Kade kissed her forehead. I am the lucky one. The baby came in early November, right around the time Victoria's well had gone dry the year before. It seemed fitting somehow, a reminder of how far they had come. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Victoria was certain she would not survive it. But Kade was there the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, encouraging her. When the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, Victoria burst into tears. A son. They had a son. He is perfect, Kade said, his voice thick with emotion. Absolutely perfect. Thomas Kane Isaacs, Victoria said, looking down at the tiny face. Welcome to the world, little one. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Victoria had never been happier. Watching Kade with their son was a revelation. He was patient and gentle, singing softly to the baby when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor at 2 in the morning so Victoria could rest. He was a natural father, and it filled her heart to overflowing. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, the ranch was thriving. They had doubled the size of their herd and hired a young man named Samuel to help with the work. Victoria managed the finances and the household, while Kade oversaw the operations and made sure everything ran smoothly. They were a team in every sense of the word, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching little Thomas toddle around the yard, Kade turned to Victoria with a serious expression. I have been thinking, he said. That sounds dangerous, Victoria teased. I want to make this official in a bigger way. I want to buy out the mortgage on this land completely, put both our names on the deed. This is our ranch, Victoria, not yours or mine, but ours. I want it to be legal and clear. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. The land had been hers, bought with Thomas's life insurance money after he died, but having Kade's name alongside hers felt right. I think that is a wonderful idea. There is something else, Kade said. I have been talking to the Hendricks family and some of the other ranchers in the area. There is interest in forming a water cooperative, pooling resources to dig wells and irrigate more land. They want me to be part of the organizing committee, given my experience with wells. Kade, that is fantastic. You should absolutely do it. It would mean traveling to meetings sometimes, being away from the ranch for a day or 2 at a time. I can manage, Victoria said firmly. We have Samuel, and I am perfectly capable of running things for a few days. This is important work, and you should be part of it. Kade pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. How did I get so lucky to find you? I think luck had very little to do with it, Victoria said. I think you were meant to ride up that drive, meant to dig that well, meant to stay. You believe in fate. I believe in us, Victoria said. And I believe that sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need exactly when we need it. I needed water, and I got you. I needed a home, Kade said, and I got you and Thomas and this life. I would dig 1,000 wells if it meant keeping all of this. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son discover the wonder of a butterfly, and Victoria felt a peace settle over her that she had never quite experienced before. This was happiness, she realized. Not the absence of hardship or struggle, but the presence of love and purpose and partnership. The years that followed were full and rich. Little Thomas grew into a lively, curious boy who adored his father and shadowed him everywhere. Kade taught him to ride when he was barely 4, patient and encouraging as the child learned to stay in the saddle. Victoria homeschooled him, using her education to give him opportunities she had not had. When Thomas was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time it was twins, a boy and a girl, and the house was suddenly overflowing with noise and chaos and joy. They named the boy James, after Kade's father, a gesture of reconciliation that led to a tentative correspondence with Kade's family back in Tennessee. The girl they named Rose, simply because Victoria loved the sound of it. Managing 3 children under the age of 5 while running a ranch was exhausting, but Victoria would not have traded it for anything. Kade was an involved father, rising early to help with the children before heading out to work, coming in at midday to check on them, and spending evenings playing and reading and simply being present. The ranch continued to prosper. The water cooperative Kade had helped establish had transformed the region, allowing ranchers to irrigate more land and support larger herds. The Isaacs Ranch became known for its quality cattle and its innovative approaches to water management. Kade was invited to speak at agricultural meetings, sharing his knowledge and experience. Victoria expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. She planted an orchard and a vegetable garden that produced more than they could use, so she began selling the surplus in town. She was shrewd and capable, and the respect she earned from the community was a source of pride for both of them. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Kade took Victoria on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children with the Hendricks family. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since the twins were born, and it felt like a honeymoon. They stayed in a real hotel, with running water and electric lights, and ate in restaurants where other people cooked and served. They walked along the waterfront and visited museums and held hands like newlyweds. And at night, in their hotel room, they reconnected in ways that reminded them they were not just parents and ranchers, but lovers and partners. "I forget sometimes," Victoria said as they lay tangled together, "how much I just enjoy you without all the other responsibilities." "We should do this more often," Kade said. "Maybe once a year, just the 2 of us." "I would like that. Victoria, can I tell you something? Always. I used to think happiness was something you had to chase, something that was always just out of reach. That is why I kept moving, kept drifting. I thought the next town, the next job, the next adventure would finally give me what I was looking for." He pulled her closer. "But it was never out there. It was here with you. You are my home and you always will be." Victoria kissed him, pouring all her love into it. "You are mine too. From that first day when you offered to dig my well, I think some part of me knew you were going to change my life." "The best decision I ever made," Kade said, echoing his words from years before. When they returned to the ranch, the children greeted them with shrieks of joy and endless stories about their adventures with the Hendricks. The house felt more alive than ever, and Victoria realized that this was the life she had always wanted, even when she had not known to want it. As Thomas grew older, he showed a natural aptitude for ranching, absorbing everything Kade taught him with eager attention. The twins were still too young to help with much, but they followed their older brother around, mimicking his actions and getting into cheerful mischief. When Thomas was 8, he asked about the well, the one that had brought his parents together. "Papa, why did you dig the well for Mama before you even knew her?" he asked one evening at supper. Kade and Victoria exchanged a look, smiling at the memory. "Because she needed help," Kade said simply, "and I had the ability to provide it. Sometimes that is all it takes to change your life, being willing to help someone when they need it." "And now we have the best well in the county," Thomas said proudly. "That we do," Victoria agreed. "And it all started because your papa was kind enough to stop and offer his help to a stranger." "I was not being kind," Kade corrected gently. "I was being selfish. I wanted a reason to stay, and your mama gave me one." "You would have stayed anyway," Victoria said. "I think you were looking for home and you found it." "I found you," Kade said. "The home came with you." The children groaned at the affection between their parents, but Victoria could see Thomas filing the story away, understanding on some level the importance of what he was hearing. When Victoria turned 30, Kade organized a party that included half the county. The ranch was filled with neighbors and friends, all celebrating not just her birthday, but the success and prosperity they had built together. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. As Victoria watched Kade swing Rose around the yard, both of them laughing, while James tried to keep up and Thomas helped serve the guests, she felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This life, this family, this love, it had all started with a dry well and a stranger's kindness. Mrs. Hendricks found her standing alone for a moment and linked arms with her. "You have built something special here, Victoria." "We have been lucky," Victoria said. "It is not luck. It is hard work and good choices and love. You and Kade are an inspiration to all of us." "He is a good man," Victoria said simply. "The best. We all knew it when he organized the water cooperative. He could have kept his knowledge to himself, made himself indispensable, but instead he shared it freely. That is the mark of true character." Victoria found Kade later after most of the guests had left and the children were asleep in their beds. He was sitting on the porch, looking out at the land they had built together. "Tired?" she asked, settling beside him. "Happy tired," he said. "That was a good party." "You did not have to go to all that trouble." "Yes, I did. You deserve to be celebrated, Victoria. You deserve to know how much you are loved and appreciated." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I know, you show me every day. Do you ever miss it? Your old life before all this?" Victoria thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of having fewer responsibilities, but I would not trade this life for anything. This is exactly where I am supposed to be. Even with 3 wild children and a husband who still does not know when to quit working. Especially with all of that." She turned to look at him. "Kade, do you ever regret not drifting anymore, not seeing new places, having adventures?" "Never. My adventure is right here, watching our children grow, building this ranch, growing old with you. That is all the excitement I need." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds and feeling the warm breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and Victoria felt Kade's arm tighten around her protectively, even though they were perfectly safe. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too." More every day. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. Thomas proved to be a natural leader, taking on more responsibility as he entered his teenage years. The twins, James and Rose, were inseparable and constantly getting into trouble together. They were a handful, but they filled the house with laughter and energy. When Thomas was 15, Kade began teaching him the finer points of well drilling, passing on the knowledge that had changed their lives. The boy took to it naturally, understanding the geology and the mechanics with an ease that made Kade proud. "He is going to be better at this than I ever was," Kade told Victoria one night. "He learned from the best." Victoria said. "I am serious. He has a real gift for understanding water, for reading the land. I think he could make a career of this if he wanted to. Is that what you want for him?" Kade shook his head. "I want him to be happy, whatever that means for him. But I will teach him everything I know, and then he can choose." Victoria became pregnant one last time when she was 33. It was unexpected and, if she was honest, a little overwhelming. 3 children were already a lot, and she had been looking forward to the twins starting school and having a bit more freedom. But when she told Kade, his joy was so complete that she could not help but be excited too. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. Victoria was tired all the time, and her body ached in ways it had not before. Kade was even more protective than usual, insisting she rest and let him handle more of the household duties. The children pitched in too, with Thomas taking on adult responsibilities and the twins learning to be helpful rather than hindrances. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived in late summer. He was small but healthy, with Kade's blue-green eyes and Victoria's dark hair. Holding him, Victoria felt a completeness she had not known she was missing. "Our last one," she said to Kade as he gazed down at his newest son. "Are you sure about that?" he teased. "Absolutely certain," Victoria said firmly. 4 is plenty. 4 is perfect," Kade agreed. "We have everything we could possibly need." Raising Daniel while managing 3 other children and a ranch was chaotic, but the family pulled together. Thomas was an enormous help, often taking care of his baby brother so Victoria could get other things done. The twins were less helpful but endlessly entertaining, and their antics kept everyone laughing. When Daniel was 2, Victoria's father wrote to her for the first time in over a decade. He had remarried to a widow with means and had rebuilt his life in Philadelphia. The letter was stiff and formal, but it was an olive branch, and Victoria chose to accept it. She wrote back, telling him about her life, her family, her happiness. Kade encouraged the correspondence, even suggesting they might visit Philadelphia someday when the children were older. Victoria was touched by his generosity, knowing that her father had never approved of her marriage to Thomas and would likely have opinions about Kade as well. "If he cannot see how blessed you are, then that is his failing, not yours," Kade said. "But I think he deserves a chance to know his grandchildren." The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They hired more help, expanding their operations to include not just cattle but also horses. Kade had a knack for training, and their horses became sought after throughout the territory. Victoria managed the business side, keeping careful records and ensuring they remained profitable. When Thomas turned 18, he announced that he wanted to apprentice with a drilling company out of California to learn more about the latest techniques and technologies. It was the first time one of their children would leave home, and Victoria found it harder than she had anticipated. "He will come back," Kade assured her. "This is his home and he knows it, but he needs to spread his wings a bit, see what else is out there. It is what young men do." "It is what you did," Victoria said, "and I came back, did I not? To the place I was meant to be." Thomas left in the spring, promising to write often and return by the next year. The house felt emptier without him, but Victoria threw herself into managing the ranch and raising the younger children. The twins were now teenagers themselves, full of opinions and energy, and Daniel was a curious and active 5-year-old. Life settled into a new rhythm, and Victoria found herself with more time to pursue interests she had set aside. She started a small lending library in Kingston, donating books and encouraging others to do the same. She also became involved in advocating for better schools in the territory, using her own education to argue for the importance of learning. Kade supported her endeavors fully, proud of her passion and intelligence. He often joked that he had married above his station, but Victoria always corrected him. They were equals, partners in every way that mattered. True to his word, Thomas returned after a year, full of new knowledge and ideas. He had learned advanced drilling techniques and wanted to apply them to the ranch and to help other ranchers in the area. Kade welcomed his input, and together, they began upgrading their well systems and offering consulting services to neighbors. The twins, James and Rose, both showed interest in different aspects of ranch life. James loved the horses and wanted to focus on breeding and training, while Rose had a head for numbers and wanted to study bookkeeping and business. Victoria and Kade encouraged both of them, determined to give their children opportunities to pursue their passions. When Victoria turned 40, she looked back on her life with a sense of deep satisfaction. She had been widowed, nearly lost everything, and then had been given a second chance at love and happiness. The well that had run dry all those years ago had brought Kade into her life, and with him had come everything she had never known to hope for. Kade was 42 now, with silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He was still strong and capable, though he complained more about his aching back after long days of work. He was still the man she had fallen in love with, steady and kind and devoted. They celebrated her birthday quietly, just the two of them, sitting on the porch as they had so many times before. The children were all occupied with their own pursuits, giving them a rare moment of peace. "You remember the day we met?" Victoria asked. "Every detail," Kade said. "You were standing by the well, looking determined and exhausted and beautiful. I knew right then that my life was about to change. I thought you were crazy, offering to dig a well for a complete stranger. Maybe I was, but it was the best kind of crazy." Victoria took his hand, worn and calloused from years of hard work. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me," Kade said. "Thank you for building this life with me." They sat in the gathering dusk, watching the stars come out one by one, content in the knowledge that they had created something lasting and good. The well that Kade had dug all those years ago still provided clear, cold water, a testament to his skill and determination. But more than that, it was a symbol of what could happen when two people chose to work together, to trust each other, to build something greater than themselves. As Victoria rested her head on Kade's shoulder, she thought about all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. The drought that had dried up her well, the desperation that had made her accept help from a stranger, the slow building of trust and affection and love. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. "What are you thinking about?" Kade asked softly. "Everything," Victoria said. "Nothing. Just how grateful I am for all of this." "Me too," Kade said, and kissed the top of her head. The children continued to grow and find their paths. Thomas married a young woman from Kingston, a teacher named Sarah who shared his passion for innovation and progress. They built a house on the far edge of the property and started their own family, giving Victoria and Kade their first grandchildren. Twin boys, which made everyone laugh at the apparent family tendency toward multiples. James established a horse breeding program that became renowned throughout Nevada and into California. He traveled frequently to shows and sales, but always returned home, unable to stay away for long. He eventually married as well, to a rancher's daughter from up north, and they settled into one of the newly built cottages on the expanding Isaacs property. Rose was the surprise. She had no interest in ranching or marriage, at least not immediately. Instead, she moved to San Francisco to study business and accounting, determined to make her own way. Victoria worried about her daughter in the city, But Kade reminded her that Rose was capable and smart and needed the freedom to explore. "She is like you," he said. "Strong and independent and determined. She will be fine." And she was. Rose thrived in the city, working for a large firm and eventually starting her own bookkeeping business. She came home for visits several times a year, full of stories about the modern world and all its changes. She never married, choosing instead to focus on her career, and Victoria learned to accept that her daughter's path was different from what she had imagined but no less valid. Daniel, the baby, grew into a quiet, thoughtful young man who loved books and learning. He wanted to be a lawyer, of all things, and Victoria could not have been more proud. She and Kade saved money to send him to university, determined to give him every opportunity. As Victoria and Kade entered their 50s, they began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting Thomas and James take over more of the management. It was strange at first, relinquishing control of something they had built together, but it was also freeing. They had time to travel, visiting Rose in San Francisco, exploring other parts of the country, even making a trip back to Tennessee to see Kade's family. His father had passed away, but his mother was still alive, and meeting her grandchildren brought her immense joy. She and Victoria became friends, bonding over their shared love of Kade and their pride in the family he had built. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. All 4 children were there, along with their various spouses and children. The house and the grounds were filled with 3 generations of Isaacs, all descended from the moment when a drifter had stopped to help a widow with a dry well. Kade stood up to make a toast, and the crowd quieted to listen. 25 years ago, I was a man without a home, without a purpose, without any real idea of what I wanted from life. I was drifting, literally and figuratively, looking for something I could not name. He looked at Victoria, his eyes soft with love. And then I met this remarkable woman who needed help digging a well. I thought I was just doing a good deed, earning some room and board. I had no idea I was digging my way into the rest of my life. There was laughter and a few sniffles from the crowd. Victoria gave me everything I had been searching for. A home, a purpose, a family, a reason to put down roots and stay. She made me want to be a better man, and then she gave me the opportunity to become one. Every day with her has been a gift, even the hard days, even the days when we have fought or struggled or wondered how we would make it through. Because we made it through together, and that has made all the difference. He raised his glass. To my wife, my partner, my love. Thank you for 25 years of happiness. Here is to 25 more. To Victoria and Kade. The crowd chorused, glasses raised. Victoria stood then, her own glass in hand. I am not as good with words as my husband, but I want to say this. When my first husband died, I thought my life was over. I was alone and scared and convinced I would lose everything. And then this stubborn, kind, impossible man showed up and refused to leave until he had fixed my well. In the process, he fixed my life. She looked around at all the faces, at the family they had created together. This is what love looks like, not just the romance, though we have certainly had plenty of that. But the partnership, the commitment to working together even when it is hard, the choice to keep choosing each other every single day. Kade has been my rock, my joy, my home, and I would dig 1,000 dry wells if it meant finding him all over again. There were definitely tears now from almost everyone present. To love, Victoria said. To family. To the next 25 years. To love, the crowd echoed. The party went on late into the night with music and dancing and endless storytelling. Victoria watched her family with a full heart, marveling at how much had grown from such simple beginnings. A dry well and a stranger's kindness had created all of this. Later, when the guests had finally departed and the house was quiet, Victoria and Kade walked out to the original well, the one that had started everything. It still stood, well-maintained and functional, a piece of their history. You ever think about how different things could have been? Victoria asked. If the well had not gone dry, if you had not stopped here all the time, Kade admitted. But I try not to dwell on it. I prefer to think about how lucky we were that it did go dry, that I did stop. Some people spend their whole lives searching for what we found. Do you ever regret not drifting anymore, not seeing what else was out there? Kade pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Not for a single second. I have everything I could ever want right here. You, our children, our grandchildren, this land. This is my great adventure, Victoria. And I would not trade it for anything. They stood there in the moonlight, next to the well that had changed both their lives, and Victoria felt a peace settle over her that was deeper than contentment. This was happiness, true and lasting, built on a foundation of trust and work and love. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Kade's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep, and they made the journey to Tennessee for the funeral. Victoria's father died a few years later, and though their reconciliation had been incomplete, she grieved for what might have been. But there were far more joys than sorrows. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Thomas's drilling business expanded to serve the entire territory. James's horses won prizes at shows throughout the West. Rose's business thrived, and she eventually took on a business partner, another independent woman who shared her vision. Daniel graduated from law school and opened a practice in Carson City, specializing in water rights, carrying on his father's legacy in a different form. Victoria and Kade grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their share of health scares and setbacks, but they faced them together, as they had faced everything. When Kade developed problems with his heart in his early 60s, Victoria nursed him through it with fierce determination. When Victoria broke her hip in a fall a few years later, Kade was by her side every moment of her recovery. On their 40th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch once more, older and slower but no less in love. Their children had wanted to throw another big party, but Victoria and Kade had requested something quieter, just the immediate family. 40 years, Kade mused. That is a long time. Not long enough, Victoria said. I could use 40 more. I will do my best to give them to you, Kade said, though they both knew that was unlikely. They were in their late 60s now, and while still relatively healthy, they were slowing down. You know what I am most proud of? Victoria asked. What? This, all of this. Not just the ranch or the success or the money we have made, but the family we have raised, the values we have instilled, the legacy we are leaving. Our children are good people, Kade, kind and hardworking and decent. We did that together. We did, Kade agreed, and they will carry it forward long after we are gone. I do not like thinking about that, neither do I, but it is comforting to know that what we built will outlast us. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set behind the mountains as they had done thousands of times before. The well still stood nearby, a constant reminder of where they had begun. Victoria, Kade said softly. Yes. Thank you for the best 40 years of my life. Thank you for every moment, every memory, every day I got to wake up next to you. Thank you for stopping that day, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for digging my well and staying to help me build a life. Thank you for loving me. Always, Kade said. Always and forever. They held hands and watched the stars emerge, content in the knowledge that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. Their love story had started with a dry well and a stranger's offer of help, but it had become something epic and enduring, a testament to the power of kindness and commitment, and choosing each other every single day. Kade lived to be 71, passing away peacefully in his sleep with Victoria beside him. She held his hand and told him she loved him one last time, and though her heart shattered into a million pieces, she also felt grateful. Grateful for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over to pay their respects to the man who had helped so many. The water cooperative he had helped establish sent representatives. Ranchers whose wells he had dug came to honor his memory. And his family, vast and loving, gathered to celebrate a life well lived. Victoria stood at his grave, supported by her children, and spoke the words she had prepared. Kade Isaacs was the best man I ever knew. He was kind without being weak, strong without being cruel, loving without being possessive. He taught me that it is never too late to start over, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that hard work and dedication can build something lasting and beautiful. He gave me 40 years of happiness, and I will carry him in my heart for whatever time I have left. She lived for 3 more years, remaining on the ranch with Thomas and his family. She spent her time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the well that had brought them all together. She wrote down the story in detail so that future generations would know where they came from and what their legacy meant. On a warm September afternoon, almost exactly 43 years after the day her well had gone dry, Victoria Kane Isaacs passed away quietly in her sleep. Her family laid her to rest next to Kade, under the wide Nevada sky, near the well that had changed everything. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations. Thomas's children and grandchildren kept it going, honoring the legacy of hard work and integrity that Kade and Victoria had established. The original well still stands, maintained and preserved as a piece of family history. A plaque was placed there, telling the story of the widow whose well went dry in June, and the cowboy who dug 30 feet down and found not just water, but love, purpose, and a home. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right across the Nevada desert, those who know the story swear they can almost hear laughter from the old porch, see 2 figures sitting together watching the sunset, their hands intertwined, their love as enduring as the land itself.